And welcome once again to Lato's Law. I'm Steve Lato, attorney at law in the state of Michigan, where we're on a lockdown like everyone else. I will not be using the C word today due to the fact that there are mixed messages coming out of the powers that be about whether or not you can say those things on the YouTube. So I do want to, and this, by the way, is one of the reasons I wanted to do a live feed today, is I wanted to point out a whole bunch of changes to the things behind me. And this is almost entirely, exclusively due to the generosity of people who've sent me stuff. But you may notice, for instance, I've got a Viper. We all knew it was going to happen, right? So I got a note from a gentleman named Richard over there in England. And he said, "Hey, Steve, found your YouTube during the summer of 2019 when a vacation I planned didn't go as I expected." But he says, I work in the automotive industry, and I've got a collection of scale cars. And the collection peaked at 1,500 models of various sizes. And he says some are duplicated and so on. So he decided that apparently he had an extra. So the Viper right there, that's the correct model. That's possibly the color. That's the year. So there we go. Got the Viper courtesy of Richard. Richard also passed along to me the two flags. One is the flag of the state of Michigan, and one is the flag of Hampshire, which apparently is the county flag for the area in which he lives. And that's good to know because we've all heard of New Hampshire, and now we know where Old Hampshire was, apparently. So thank you very much for that. I greatly appreciate it. And anytime I get something to work into the collection, it causes things to shuffle around and move, and I apologize for that. I've had some people say they don't like change, and that happens. But you know, change is inevitable. So it happens. So I also got a note from Sammy, and Sammy was the one who sent me this microphone. And I had mentioned that it's a neat microphone. It's an old American DR332, and I like it a lot. It's very, very cool. But it doesn't fit on any of the microphone stands that I've got. But I balanced it back there, and it was a precarious balance, but it was, you know, something I was willing to do. And he actually emailed me and said, "Steve, could you please send me the dimensions of the bottom of that? I'll make you a base." And so in yesterday's mail, I got the base. Felt bottom, looks to be machine tooled by someone with tools, equipment, and skills I don't have. And that fits right there. So we put the microphone on its base, and it will stay there. And I greatly appreciate it. So thank you very much. And thank you for everyone checking in. I know a lot of people are at home, you know, and you know, a lot of jobs. They've sent people home, said work from home if you can. Unfortunately, I know a lot of people aren't getting paid right now, which is, you know, a crying shame. But of course, you know, it all makes sense. There's a reason this is happening. So, you know. But let's check out, see who's checking in here. Stephen Baines, Gary Oxford, bars and bartenders are losing a lot. Yeah, especially tonight. You know, this is St. Patrick's Day. Oh, by the way, Betty Anderson goes, what was the final room count on Sunday, the live feed? I believe it was 1,057 or 1,058. My counter only showed a 1 with a K following it with a plus sign, meaning that it was above 1,000, but apparently not. I think they'd go 1.1 if I hit 1,100. But I had several people send me screen grabs, and somebody sent me a screen grab, I believe at 10:57 or 10:58. So we broke 1,000 in the room, which is huge for me. Most of my live feeds only get 500 or 600 max in the room at one time. So what are those glass objects by the microphone you just pointed out? Raymond is talking about these. These are radio transmitter tubes. There's two of them back here. And then I've got a smaller one here. And these are just, you know, mementos. People sent these into me. But when I worked in radio years and years and years ago, we had a transmitter that ran off these. And also worked at a place that had those old school. Back when they used tubes in the transmitters. I suspect that tubes aren't as common as they were back in the day. Con Clark is pointing out that a neighboring state has its bars open. And, you know, it's unfortunate because some people don't believe that this could happen to them. And, I've seen photographs out of Florida right now because there's kids down there on spring break. And you try to explain to a 19-year-old that they really shouldn't go out on the beach and hang out with, thousands of drunken people all in close proximity. And they're like, but hey, it's spring break. So it's kind of tough to do that. Morgan W., are those the ones you asked people for in an old video? Yeah, I've gotten a lot of the stuff in response to calls I put out. I mentioned if anybody had an old radio transmitter tube, working or otherwise, I'd be happy to put it on display. And I got 3 sent to me. I had offers of more, but I actually said, something, I don't need any more at this time because I'm getting, overwhelmed with these donations, and I appreciate them, but I'm running out of room. And so the cool thing is I had several people ask me why I didn't have a Michigan flag previous to this for the state of Michigan. And I just didn't have one. I looked briefly and I wanted to find one that was the same scale as the 2 other flags I've got. And I half-heartedly did a search and I didn't find one. But then, like I said, my friend from across the pond sent one over. So that's just as good as one I could have gotten myself. So I greatly appreciate that. And plus, it's a better story. Mike Dalton says, high-power transmitters still use tubes. Do they really? I thought they could replace everything with transistors these days. I know a lot of the FM stations I worked at. Well, I have to take that back because the stations I worked at didn't always have the transmitter on site. So in other words, there'd be a booth and all the stuff would get funneled into a closet someplace, and then it might get up and sent to a transmitter site. I don't know what they've got at the transmitter location. The first radio station I worked at in Bad Axe, WLEW, which is still there today, the station in a building up by the road, and directly behind it is the towers, and the transmitters are all there. And so I can't remember which was out by the tower and which was in the back of the building, but I know that another radio station I worked at, WTRX in Flint, had a building. And again, the towers were right there. And I remember seeing those tubes glowing in a big bank of equipment. And you could actually see them while you're on the air, which is like kind of a cool thing. So I like that. Jay Richards, don't use vodka. I assume we're talking about using vodka as, as an antibacterial agent. I have to admit, I've got a bottle of Finlandia vodka on top of my refrigerator. It's a display piece because I don't drink this stuff. But, it's there. I like anything having to do with Finland. In fact, several people pointed out that last week I had this got added to the set. I'm not sure how much longer it will last because this is candy. But the thing about this is Finnish black licorice candy. And the Finns are known to be a rather stoic folk who occasionally go through hardship, often self-inflicted. And I'd refer to that black licorice candy as being part of that category. So Cyberdoc says vodka will work if you drink enough of it. Yeah, that's the thing. You have to graph how much of it you got to drink to get the effect. And then, of course, you got to graph how much of you can drink before you die and hope that those 2 lines don't cross during your lifetime. Bill Van Rim, I have Woodcase tube radio from the 60s. It sounds better than modern devices. Yeah, Bill, the cool thing about tubes is they do have a very, I hate to use a cliche, but it's true, a warm sound to them. And, I understand that nowadays that they can simulate a lot of that stuff electronically synthesized and so on. But, I absolutely would agree with you that, for instance, it's almost like an LP. You take a 33 1/3 record and put it on a turntable, a good turntable, and listen to it. Yeah, you're going to hear some of the artifacts of the pops and the dust and the noise, but the sound you get off an LP is better. It's more comforting than the sound you get off of a CD. So. Joel Kirschman, what is the hand signal for a lemon? Probably a, but I'll have to think about that. I don't know if there's an official one yet or not. Morgan W., there's still a good market for old tubes. I used to buy and sell them fairly often. Yeah, in fact, if you go onto eBay and type in old radio tubes, you'll get a ton of listings. And I will admit that I bought several of my microphones off of YouTube. I'm always looking for interesting looking microphones. And my Big Shure, the Big Shure in the middle, is one that I specifically looked for. I wanted to get one of those Shure mics. It's one of the first ones I got, and I think I got that off of eBay years ago. I forgot what I paid for it, but in my mind, I know that guys in the recording industry will say, well, this mic sounds good. Or this. I simply wanted mics that look good. I only need one that sounds good, and that's this one right here. DC Viper Guy, I see the Viper on your shelf. Actively looking for one yet? Almost. I'm this close to pulling the trigger on one. But Damon is the guy who sent me the two Hot Wheels, and we corresponded in the last couple of days about this. I meant to write you back, but I'm gonna tell you now. Damon sent me the Viper Hot Wheel and the Prowler, and he told me that he keeps them with his Viper or his Prowler that he had, and brings them to shows. And if little kids are enjoying the car, he'll occasionally give them a Hot Wheel as a souvenir, which is pretty cool if you think about it. And so I had mentioned that day when I pulled out those Hot Wheels that I really like the Viper. I'm not a big fan of the Prowler, but Damon said, by the way, I had one of those too. So the Prowler is a different thing. It was a more of a, it was inspired by the hot rods, the modified, guys that took the Deuce Coupes and hopped them up. And I understand what they're getting at with it, but I seem to recall the power plant was not that impressive. And the Viper, in my mind, is the complete package. Take a V10 and shoehorn it into a cool body and sell them to the public. So there you go. Betty Anderson, Lato's lemon vodka. Shill that. That's not a bad idea. By the way, for those of you who are curious, today I'm drinking my Gatorade. Hang on a second. Hang on. And this is a Gatorade, by the way. And, of course, you'll recognize that. And this, I'll put a link in the description below. It's all available on Zazzle. Somewhere down the road, I will take the money I get off that and give it away to a good cause. But I have to earn $100 first, and that hasn't happened yet on Zazzle. Jeopardy 4100, courts closing, more time with Steve. Yeah, that's true. And the funny thing is that I mentioned that the courts last week had cut back on, they basically talked about what they're going to do with respect to security precautions. But this week they actually came out and said, okay, here's what we're doing. And they are eliminating and adjourning all non-essential stuff. And by non-essential in the legal sense, we're talking about stuff that's not time sensitive. So, you must be arraigned within a certain period of time. But if you file a lawsuit, your trial can be 2 years from now. They don't care. So they're going to adjourn a ton of stuff. So I suspect that right about now, most of the courts around the nation are turning into ghost towns. The cities are as well. Bridget Fian, model boats, ships. Not sure you're asking me if I have any, but the only model boat I've got is I've got half the Titanic here. I've got the half that's above the water. I just realized if I wanted to be funny, I could flip it over and glue it here as if it was going down that way. The problem, of course, is it weighs like 20 pounds. So, Silence checking in from Cincinnati, Ohio. Stay safe. Yeah, thank you for checking in. And I mentioned last week, we talked about this on the live feed on Sunday. Cincinnati's got its airport in Kentucky. Why not? Let them deal with it. Thomas Holt. Hey, Steve, I'm at work, but not doing a whole lot. Listening while I work. Hey, thanks for checking in. I hope I don't distract you, and I hope you don't have a job that's so sensitive that you can screw something up and kill somebody. But Mike Gertz, it's like a walk back in time. The interstates work again without gridlock. Yeah, I went for a drive the other day, and I noticed that there were cars up, but not that many. And I think tomorrow I'm going to go into the office. I got news for you. I'm not at the office right now, in case you didn't figure that out. But I'm going at the office tomorrow to pick something up, so I'll do an inventory at that time of what the traffic looks like in and around the Oakland County area of Michigan, where my office is. Ad Libertor, hello from Bridgeport, Ohio. Stay safe and stay healthy. Same to you, my friend. Thanks for checking in. Andrew Allen, big question is, do you have enough toilet paper? What's funny is I remember going shopping 2 weeks ago and then a week ago, and I tried really hard to just shop like a normal person. I'm not gonna loot. I'm not gonna hoard. I'm not gonna buy everything on the shelf. And I remember walking through there going, and then the last couple of days watching TV, and it finally hit where I am, to where entire aisles just cleaned out. And the thing is that they'll all be restocked in a couple of days. So I hope people aren't paying outrageous premiums for that stuff. But, will demolish. Are Four Winds boats still made in Cadillac? I don't know. Four Winds, I think, is one of the companies that's changed owners a few times, at least during my legal practice. I don't handle much boat type warranty work as I used to. I used to actually handle quite a bit of it, even though the lemon law itself does not cover boats directly. I would handle lemon law claims, types of claims with boats and RVs and so on. And I learned a couple of valuable lessons with boats, one of which is I got a huge judgment against a boat company who went bankrupt. And the judgment got discharged, meaning that my client got nothing and I got nothing. And so it was a lot of time spent spinning our wheels, in effect, even though we won. So kind of teach you a lesson that way. We got 382 people in the room, by the way, so I'm very happy about that. And I have to mention, I won't gore you out with it, but there's my eye, and it's the subconjunctival hemorrhage. And every video I've done since, I think, Thursday or Friday when it happened, I've mentioned what it is. And about once a video, somebody goes, "What is wrong with your eye?" Even though I mentioned it at the end, they just didn't make it that far. But it's a fairly common injury. Apparently, Joe Biden gets them from time to time. It happens to old guys, but he's older than I am, substantially, okay? So I'm not supposed to be getting these regularly. I've never had one before. It doesn't hurt. It's getting better. I wouldn't know I had it, except I looked in the mirror and like, whoa, it scared me too. So, junior physics, Steve, watching instead of grading general physics final exams, forced to be online. College campus is a ghost town. Where do you teach? I've got a couple friends who teach, and and one of them called me up very, very early and said, "Steve, I've got to come up with the technology to do this very quickly. How can you help me?" I said, "Yes, I can. I've actually got a bunch of extra equipment because now that I've upgraded to this camera and this laptop and this equipment, I've got some leftover stuff that I was using just 6 months ago." And so I said, I can walk you through the process. But what's funny is when he asked me the question, I actually thought, I wonder if it's going to get to that. Turns out it got to that. So there you go. Will demolish. Thanks for checking in. Andrew Allen, still waiting for the pirate eye patch. And I keep telling you guys, if someone makes a tactical eye patch, something that's actually advertised as a tactical eye patch, I'll wear one. They make tactical everything else. I'm surprised there's not tactical toilet paper. There probably is. Okay. I've seen tactical pants. I've seen tactical underwear. Okay. Someone's got to make a tactical eye patch. Dale K, is that your color pick for a Viper? Referring to the blue there. It's one of the acceptable colors. I like that Viper in blue. I like it in red. And I also like it in yellow. I've seen it in yellow. With or without the stripes. I'm not picky about that. I don't mind the stripes. So, we'll see. JP says that would be a carbon fiber eye patch. It was tactical. I presume so. I'm assuming it's going to have all kinds of Kevlar and stuff in it too. And probably Bluetooth. So you have to remember that Bluetooth is now what turbo was in the 90s. Everything was turbo in the 90s. and you can get like turbo hairspray, So, yeah, David Persons, if you get the eye patch, you need to practice my my pirate speak. So, Brianna CC, please go live every day to get me through this. I might have to. Jerry Hindle, did you get the Amazon package I sent you? I need to know what's in the package. I got several things recently, including a new T-shirt that I wore. Can't remember what in a video today or it's in a video that goes up tomorrow. But someone sent me a new T-shirt, and I've got a bunch of other stuff. I've got some other stuff I haven't gotten to yet either. So there's always stuff coming up. Doug McCullough, hey, Steve, from a Caterpillar D8 Dozer in South Texas. You're actually on board the D8 right now. I know what that is from watching all those gold shows on the Discovery Channel. Page B, do you think there'll be mortgage relief? That's a tough one because I've had people ask me about mortgages, utility bills, and things of that nature. And they've talked about some kind of relief package and bringing in money to try to smooth things out regarding recent events in the news. And the problem is that mortgage relief, for instance, would require each lender to step up and say, yes, we're willing to do this. Whether the government can force them to do that, there's incentives they can give them to do it. But it's I'm sure they're going to do it on a day-by-day basis just to see what kinds of things they come up with. MJ Gale 52 says E4 your move. Fine. E5. Unfortunately, I can't play an entire game in my head, so that's going to be about it there. For those of you who don't know, it's a chess reference. Jerry Hindle, how's the eye doing? It's getting better, but you can't tell. But if you get up real close to it, you can tell. Bud Rowe, are you missing a microphone? Yeah, I actually replaced one microphone and slid them all over to make room for the flags right there. I pulled out a microphone that was actually on this side that I thought was kind of ugly, and I flipped them around and I rearranged everything with the cars also. I get complaints anytime I move anything, so I decided to just yank the bandage and rip the bandage and change everything at one time, so the shock to the system would be lessened. Trek 001, Steve, your voice is so damn dreamy. Oh, thank you. I used to work in radio, my friends. God of Maine, Steve, what are some of your favorite hobbies? Besides the stuff you see me do here, like the collections of stuff and the dictionaries and so on, my only real hobbies that you don't see on camera that often are metal detecting, which I do in the summertime, but haven't done that in a while because of the temperature outside. Metal detecting. I do a lot of mountain biking. I do a lot of running. If you want to just think of hobby as something that consumes your time, I do a lot of running. I also do have the Peloton. For those of you who don't know, I have a Peloton exercise bike, and I this morning did my 265th ride on it since I got it in October. So I average about 13 rides a week. Most days I do 6. Most days I do 2 a day. And then one day a week, I do 1 a day. But I haven't missed a day since I got it in October. So page B, you do a great job interacting with chat. Maybe that's the best I've seen. Nice. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I worked in radio for a while doing talk radio. And Morgan W., running from what? That's the question. What are you running from? If I stop, I might find out. Maybe that's what I'm running from, is the fear of the unknown. And Hatsy says, what mountain bike do you have? I have a Haro. It's a Haro, I think S2 or S3. It's a full suspension with hydraulic brakes, but it's a Haro. I like Haro, the brand, a lot. In fact, I've got a Haro shirt someplace. I've only worn it on camera once or twice. But I mentioned earlier, I worked in radio for a while, so the voice compliment still gets me. Recommendations for bicycles? Braking recommendations. Not sure what the question is. Thomas Holt, I sent you the Lionel Hutz action figure. Did you open it? No, I did not. Not yet. Not yet. I actually just realized it might fit over here. There's a spot right here. This right here is extremely valuable real estate. I just haven't figured out what to put there yet. Maybe Lionel will go over there. So, MJ Gale 52, the electric bikes are looking tempting. I've seen some electric bikes popping up on the internet, and it is interesting to me. But to me, the whole fun of going out in the woods and doing mountain biking is it's extremely good exercise, and the terrain changes quickly enough, and you're moving along, and it's visually interesting enough to get your mind off the fact that you're exercising. So that's one of the things I like about the Peloton is they have that screen in front of you. You can either take a class or go for a ride someplace, and it distracts you. The worst exercise on earth is the exercise where you're sitting there going, I'm exercising. And it's difficult to work hard like that when it's just a grind. So one of the reasons I like mountain biking is out in the woods. It just seems like you're having fun, So, Joey Seagulls, tell a story about the disc jockey groupies. I didn't have much to tell in that regard. I know some DJs who've got some great stories, but I hate to tell other people's stories. So the weird part is that most disc jockeys don't ever actually have groupies, and didn't back in the day. Radio was never that big, unless of course you showed up at an event and could possibly get somebody into an event, for instance. And I'll tell you a story only because I know about this one, but a friend of mine was a very high-profile disc jockey at a radio station, and he went to a big show someplace, and he was wearing his jacket. I've got one, by the way. I've got a tour jacket that says the name of the radio station on the back. I'll bring it out next time. And a young woman approached him and said something to the effect of, "Can you get me backstage?" And he said something back to her, in effect saying, "If you could get backstage, what would you do in exchange for this?" As if this is a transaction in a contract negotiation. And it turns out the contract would not have been valid, as they say, because of the fact that the other party to the transaction was underage. And the police didn't get involved, but some parents called the radio station very upset. And the friend of mine who's a disc jockey got suspended for a week. And I remember people calling the radio station going, "Can you explain why he's not on the air right now?" And I'm like, he'll be back in the air Monday. You ask him. So there you go. Tree L bowling, surfing banned in Italy and Spain. The interesting thing about surfing is you're out on the water and you're not near other people for the most part if you're doing it right. The problem, of course, is that if people are congregating on the beach or, whatever, and that's what's going on in Florida right now. So Bill Van Ram, she did not. And that explains why the whole thing went south, so to speak. Oh, boy. Dick Bowen, I miss being able to call radio stations and just chat with whomever was on. Wonder if people still can. That's the sad part, is that so many radio stations used to have a request line. And I remember working at radio stations and people would just call. And they might call to request a song, or they might call to, ask a sports score or something. But there was a time when, after I'd been on the air for a while at a station, where there would just be regular callers who just say, "Hey, I heard you on the radio. How you doing? What are you up to? Blah, 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 blah." And both men and women. And it was a fun thing. And what's funny is I was just telling somebody this the other day. I've got a friend who is a doctor. The man is a doctor. And I met him over the phone. I've never met him face to face, ever. And I know him because his mother called into my radio talk show when I was doing live call and talk as an attorney. And she had a legal question I answered, and I helped her with it. And then every so often, she would call me and just thank me. And say, "I want to thank you for helping me." And somewhere along the line, her son called me and said, "Hey, I'm her son," and introduced himself to me. And later on, he went to college, went to medical school, became a doctor. And about once every 6 months, out of the blue, he'll just call me and say, hey, Steve, I wanted to say hi. And the guy's a doctor now. And it's funny because I forgot it was the day of the car, when I got in a car accident, when I got rear-ended in my Explorer. I mentioned in a video, I said, I was in a car accident. He sent me a note. He said, Steve, I hope you're okay. It's like, yeah, thank you for asking. And it was one of those things that caused me to think, like, I met this guy back in like 1994, but I met him when he was just, I think, in high school because I befriended his mother. Like, you know, and life is funny like that. So you never know. Diana S.F. Eng, hello, Steve Leto, and all in the chat. Hello, 480 people here, which is to me mind blowing. I can't say don't you all have something better to do because I assume you don't. Mountain Man Coins is all of Michigan in lockdown. I'm joking about lockdown and sheltering in place due to recent events in the news. A lot of things are canceled. They are encouraging people to not congregate, to not go places. And for instance, in the legal settings, courts are down to just nothing but the most vital things. So many attorneys I know are working from home, or they go to the office, but they're not meeting with anybody. And pretty much everywhere you go, it's the equivalent of a holiday in a roundabout way. So Trek 001, Steve, you'd answer questions on the air. Was this the real life version of Frasier with Kelsey Grammer? Yes. In fact, if you read the description, I know what's funny is a lot of people have seen my videos on YouTube. How many of you have gone to my homepage on YouTube and looked at the channel page where it actually says, you know, I'm Steve Leto. Here's a description of me. There's a photograph. It's the tail end of a Chrysler Turbine car across the top. Has all my contact information. And it actually says Leto's Law on YouTube is, in my mind, an extension of a radio call-in talk show I had years ago at a radio station called WFDF in Flint. So, although I'm not answering questions in the same way, and somebody mentioned this earlier, if the technology existed to take phone calls, I would. I've looked into it a little bit, and I've seen guys try it, but I've never seen anybody do it successfully where it actually looked and sounded good. And I really am, by the way, we have 500 people in the room. Thank you very much. I really am a stickler for the audio side of things. And I am not, I want it to look good too. But to me, when I look at it and go, yeah, it looks okay. But if it doesn't sound perfect to me, it bothers me. And it's simply because I spent so much time in radio working with audio stuff that to me, the sound has got to be there. And I've seen guys who do call-in talk shows and live feeds, and there's a delay, there's an echo, the sound is horrible. It sounds like they're getting, you know, phone calls from inside of a garbage can. So I couldn't do that. But it's something I'm thinking about down the road if I could ever do it. So oh boy, CyberDoc, audio snobs unite. Oh, you have no idea. You have no idea. And the funny part is I'll occasionally get emails from guys who are so head and shoulders above me, and they're going, Steve, you've almost got it. You've almost got it. I'm like, look, my goal is to sound like good amateur, not bad professional, good amateur. So there you go. Dick Bowen, the main problem is people's mics. Yeah, and that often is the case. But you have to remember that it's like a chain, and the weakest link in the chain is going to be the best quality you can expect. So if you take a good mic and run it into a bad unit, it's still going to sound bad. Or if you take a good mic and use it wrong, it's not going to sound right. So the key is you have to have a good mic running into a good thing and pay attention to it and use it properly. So there you go. Hooter Snoocher. Should I call you off air? It depends on what you want to talk about. Austin Benesh, I prefer Sennheiser. Now, you are raising an interesting point because the Sennheiser microphones were the industry standard all through the early 1980s. Every FM station in America had the Sennheiser microphone. Very, very cool looking microphone. In fact, if I could get one cheaply, I'd get one and put it behind me because I remember them. being the go-to studio mic. But sometime around the mid 1980s, the trend shifted from Sennheiser to the Electro Voice RE20. And I like the RE20. I like it a lot. And again, I know we're going way technical here for people who don't care about microphones, but the Sennheiser, it's just kind of funny. I remember being at all the stations that had Sennheisers. And then I remember when the RE20 started coming in. And, do listeners even catch that? I don't know. I remember I worked at a station that used a Shure, so I mean, it often depended on some engineer somewhere made the decision to put it in the studio, and then they would just be there forever. Philip Hausler, Shure, Sennheiser, EV, or Heil. Yeah, I've used a Shure, I've used a Sennheiser, I've used the Electro Voice. I've never used a Heil, I don't think. So, EV20 is pricey. The Electro Voice RE20 will set you back. You can buy them used, and chances are a used one's just as good as a new one. You could probably take this thing out and pound nails into a 2x4 with it. It'll set you back, I think, about $400 these days for one of these. The scary part is the shock mount. This mount that it's in that's got the rubber bands around it. That's designed to remove some of the harshness if I were to tap the table or tap the stand. That shock mount will cost you about $100 too. So I remember working at radio stations and disc jockeys screwing with these things and snapping those bands, not realizing how expensive they were. Philip Hausler, properly set up SM58 is better than a poorly set up Earthworks mic. Yeah, and again, like I said, a lot of this stuff goes into how well it's set up and how well it's being used. I remember seeing disc jockeys and also talk show hosts who had no idea. And I remember, once in a while, a radio station I'd worked at would actually say, we found somebody that we think would be a good talk show host. They've got no radio experience. We're going to put them on the air. And I got tasked with a couple of those people where they'd say, Steve, go in and try to work with this person. And one of the biggest problems that people have, especially if there's another person across the table trying to help them, is they will either like clam up and not be able to speak at all, or they start speaking and then they forget that they're supposed to be speaking into the microphone over here. And, and the whole time you're pointing like that. And they're like, what? But the good news is that I've got this thing right here set that's about that far from me, and I leave it that way. And I'm pretty good at keeping my face in the zone here, so it works out. Mountain Man, boring? We'll throw a better topic on the pile, my friend. Dick Bowen, do you or did you ever listen to yourself as you talked? I assume you mean like the idea of listening specifically with like headphones or something. If you watch the earlier videos I shot, the first couple seasons I wore headphones. I did that specifically because of the fact that I was very worried about the sound. I found out later I could just turn the sound back up a little bit and just go nuts. So the AKG, still one of the best mics of all time. Never used one, although I do use AKG K240 headphones. Gotta love the AKG headphones. I've got like 4 pairs of them. Hooter Snoocher, the Diesel brothers got fined $850K. Yeah, I did a video on that. And it's interesting. I guess they did a response video to the fines. I did not watch that video, but several people told me they put up a video. But to those guys, I suspect that it's a drop in the bucket because they make so much money off their reality show. So, now you guys, no name calling in the comments. CyberDoc, have a 23-year-old pair of AKG K240s. I might also. I got my first pair in 1982, and I still have them. They're around here somewhere. I also use them metal detecting. They're that comfortable. So, let's see here. Betty Anderson, if you could time travel, what era? That's interesting because I hate to say this. Most of the interesting times to me are the times where things were really, really difficult. Like I study World War II, but I wouldn't want to live through it. I don't know. It's interesting. I'm not sure. Because the question is, do you want to go back to the 1600s, and then on the other hand, you might die of something we have a cure for nowadays. So, Tom Adams, how will recent current events affect the auto industry? And by the way, I'm calling it recent current events because of the way it gets handled. It's going to have a twofold effect. The first and most obvious one is, as people get laid off or parked at home or told to work less or whatever, the economy is going to grind a little bit, meaning that there's going to be less money to spend. So the discretionary spending being cut back means that people might put off buying cars for a while. And so it might cause a dent in the buying public and their behavior. The other problem, of course, is that nowadays we actually have a situation where you've got a factory in China making parts that get delivered to a factory in Mexico, assembling cars that get shipped to America and sold. And so any hiccup in that supply chain can cause a problem. And I talked to my good friend John, who's in Canada right now, but he's an American citizen. And he worked in the auto industry for a while. And he's telling me stories about how just-in-time supply chains can break down from the weirdest little things. In fact, he had a story where he knew of at a company he worked at where a latch that held the trunk, the deck lid shut on a car, the latches were defective. They couldn't figure out what it was. And because of that one piece only coming from one supplier, they had to stop an entire assembly line. And so you're going to have weird stuff like that, I think, happen. So I think the auto industry might get harmed, but that kind of harm is going to occur in almost every industry. I'm a little more worried about what happens to the airline industry. I read an article the other day that said that literally in a matter of months, all of them could go bankrupt. That's how close they were operating on the edge to begin with. So we're probably going to see, if this lasts much longer, we're probably going to see a whole bunch of bailouts or people screaming about bailouts, and then a lot of companies that are going to get, harmed quite badly by what happens. So we'll have to see. Robert Bettina, we've only broken 500 today in terms of people in the room. We're discussing that. Sunday we did break 1,000. I think we got about 1,057. So B Demon says you may want to make a couple of people moderators as the chat grows. I probably will have to do that. And the reason I'm saying that is that I noticed that with 1,000 people in the room on Sunday, the chat was going by so fast, I couldn't keep up with it. And I simply glanced to look for topics and also to look for anything that shouldn't be there. And if it starts moving really, really fast, it does become uncontrollable. So, yeah, no, I think the solution would be to add a couple moderators, and I will. So, Superior Service 423, which way do you prefer people to contact you? If you've got a question, especially something for this show or something, email me, steve@letoslaw.com, which is on all my various websites and so on. And so I would encourage you to email me there. I'll type it in. And if you're in Michigan and you have a legal problem that you think I'm able to help you with, like an actual lemon law complaint, call my office, okay? And the number's on my website. It's actually at the end of the videos as well. But if you do email me, give me a day or two, and I can't respond to all emails, but if you ask me a direct question, I will try to answer or respond, just let you know I saw it. But I'm not making this up. Some days I've gotten 700 or 800 emails in one day. I think I've gotten 1,000 in a day before. And so it's just, I dig through them and I look for the ones that call for responses. I do get a lot of emails from people who just say, hey, Steve, wanted to let you know I love the videos. And thank you very much. But, I try to respond thanks if I can, but it depends on what else is going on and how busy I am. So, Success Factor, did you ever consider being an in-house corporate attorney? No, I did, but I know guys who have, and it's not a bad gig because you work at a big, big company, you become the in-house attorney, and what you do is you basically advise people in-house about the various legal issues that they arise and they encounter. You help them negotiate and write contracts and so on. And the worst thing that would ever happen is if you had to go to trial, for instance, most in-house attorneys don't do that. They usually just hire the outside counsel and oversee what they do. So one of my good friends from law school, a guy named Michael, who sat, I think, a row ahead of me, most of the classes I was in, he shortly out of law school met a guy who owned a business. And the guy goes, I like you. Want to be my attorney? And my friend said, sure. And he goes, no, but for my whole company. And he became the corporate attorney for this corporation. So that's what he does. And he says he loves it. So there you go. Yeah, Betty Anderson tossing coins at Lucky Airlines. I remember I think I did a story on that, but that was the story out of China, strangely enough. People who are flying for the first time would throw lucky coins into the engines of the jets because that's what you do, apparently. So, boy. Jason Johnson's, hey, Steve, do you have any update on the Ford mystery fix? My wife had her 19 Escape done, and since the auto start stop function has been working. I can tell you that the mystery fix that I was talking about was one particular recall that they said the cars are suffering from an overheat condition, and we can solve the overheat condition by a software fix, which sounded strange to me. So I contacted someone I know who knows things. Let's just leave it at that. And I said, what's the story here? And he told me, he said, look, what they're going to do is they're going to reprogram one of the engine control module computer thingies. He used a better word than that, but that's what I'm talking about. And he goes, and what they're basically going to do is, he goes, that car has an electric fan for the radiator. And he goes, and what it's going to do is it's going to turn the fan on earlier, run it longer, and also leave the fan on, I believe, after you shut the engine off. And the thinking is by turning the fan on earlier and letting it run longer is it was going to help keep the engine from getting as hot as it was getting. It's unclear if that is going to solve the problem, but even my friend who got me the information said it's one of those things that may or may not work. And if it works, great. If it doesn't work, then they got to do something else. But he goes, but this is actually a potential fix that you would try first to see if it works. So the question is, get it done and now see if it makes a difference. So, Hooter Snoocher says, I'm not a spammer. I just want to get my answer. What was the question? Root beer. Will there be a video describing all the new hand signals? Problem with my hand signals is most of them are done on the fly, and they are, in fact, contemporaneous, meaning I do them at the time they make sense to me, but they aren't really official. So, Tom Brady, quarterback, announced he'll leave New England. Is he retiring or is he going to another team? Tom Brady, of course, played for the University of Michigan, so I do follow him a little bit. Mike asks, if I buy a new car, should I finance or just pay cash? It depends on the interest rate you get. As you might remember, I got 0.0% financing on my Ford Explorer, so I did not pay cash. I borrowed their money. Why not? 0.0% financing. Betty Anderson, if you sat on your hands, could you talk? It would be a struggle. Philip Adams, the funniest case you've been involved with. I'm not sure. I don't know if I had any particular funnies myself. I've heard of funny ones, but I'm not sure. I'll have to think about that one. Hooter Snitcher says, I have a problem with a neighbor who likes to roll coal, and I'm done with him. Does he roll it on you, or does he roll it off the property, or what? But, document it and turn them in. I don't know. It's hard to say they'll do anything. Page B, what does roll coal mean? It's a thing that some people do where they take a big old pickup truck, preferably one that's diesel, especially if it's got diesel stacks on it, and they rig it to where if they want to, they can have it suddenly start dumping tons of exhaust out the pipes, and it's almost like it became a coal burning thing. And you'll see videos of this on YouTube. It's one of the most idiotic things ever. They ought to have the right to grab one of those people who does that and take the car off the side of the road and just crush it. I mean, just absurd. It creates a hazard. They're just being idiots. But that's what some people do. So, Hooter Snoocher, can a deleted diesel be reported to the state of Michigan? Are you talking about somebody who's done an exhaust defeat system on a diesel? I'm not really sure what they would do about that, because the emission stuff is all set by the feds. And in Michigan, once you buy the vehicle, if you keep it on the roads in Michigan, it never gets inspected again. So people do, I suspect, tamper with their emissions all the time. And I'm not sure what would happen. If a police officer were to pull somebody over and could determine that that's what had happened, I suppose they could do something about it. I'm not sure who has the jurisdiction to oversee that. Michigan doesn't even have smog tailpipe testing. They had that for a little period of time and they got rid of it. So I suspect a lot of vehicles out there are in violation of the tailpipe emissions. What's her name? Do you run or mountain bike? Yes, both. I don't run if it's below 50 degrees outside, though. So in the wintertime, it's Peloton. In the summertime, I bike and run. I like to do both. They both do different muscle sets. The funny thing is, I ran once already this year. A couple weeks ago, we hit 50. Went outside and I ran just 3 miles. Came back. Next day, I was sore. And what's funny is, I'm doing the Peloton twice a day, like a machine, and running still got me sore. And it's simply because it's slightly different muscle groups. It's funny how that works. Ad Libertor, did you run in high school or just got into it as an adult? Running as a distance thing from point to point, I got into as an adult. But I have to tell you that I played soccer in high school. And all you do in soccer is run around back and forth for long periods of time. And so somewhere in the mid-1980s, I've been out of high school for a couple of years, and one of my brothers got into running 10Ks, and then later on, all the way up to marathons. And he said, "Hey, let's go for a run." And I remember I took to it very quickly because to me it was like, oh, it's kind of like soccer practice but without the ball. So I did in fact take to it very quickly. Success factor, my most favorite first car was a Plymouth Fury 3. I had a 69 Dodge Charger, which was the first car I owned, which is, of course, the car that this is based off of, but no nose cone, no wing. And I've told the story about that many, many times. And prior to that, I had to drive a Gremlin. I think it was a 74 green Gremlin to school and back. Nothing says nerdmobile like a green Gremlin. So, Stephen Garner, he runs from courtroom to courtroom. Yeah, I do from time to time. I've actually been in the Wayne County Circuit Court building, which is many, many stories tall. And there was such a crowd at the elevators that just said, I'll take the steps up. And I've actually, I think, done 15 or 20 floors in a day just in one shot. Just because I felt like, I won't take the elevator today. Then you realize it was stupid. Bob asks, hey, Steve, going back to your earlier video, can't they cut out most of the court stuff with the video arraignments? They can cut out a lot of the arraignments that way, yes, which they already have the equipment to do. But a lot of the other court stuff wouldn't make any sense because you have to have videos at both ends. And like they have those at the sheriff's department with the jail and the courthouse. But, like attorneys don't have them in their offices and so on. So it's going to shut down a lot of stuff. The Gremlin. It's kind of funny. People joke about the Gremlin. The Gremlin was one of the ugliest vehicles ever built. And I've joked before and said that if there was ever someone who should go to jail for car design, it's whoever was in charge of American Motors in the early 1970s. They had the Gremlin, they had the Pacer, they had the Javelin, and they had the Matador. Now, I'll grant you that a couple of the Javelins looked okay when they're done up as AMXs, but the rest of those vehicles were just hideous, ugly junk. So the Gremlin and the Pacer in particular were just two ugly, ugly cars. And, so Jerry Hindle had a 1969 Hearst Olds 442 with dual quads. Awesome. That's cool. The 442 is one of those sad examples of somebody who couldn't come up with a good name for a car, because I know that they have an explanation as to what the 442 stands for, but it's just kind of like, it shouldn't take that much thought. Just come up with a cool name, Charger, Challenger, Mustang, Austin Benesh, Ford Pinto or Gremlin? What's the question? Because if that's the question, at least the Gremlin wasn't going to kill you. I had a friend who had a Ford Pinto, and a lot of people forget that there was a time in America where you could get a Vega, a Pinto, a Gremlin. You could buy a little car that weighed about 2,000 pounds that was just stripped, and you could pick them up used for like $100, $200, and they ran and they got you from point A to point B until they broke down, or until they rusted out, or until something went wrong with them that was just crazy and goofy. And I've found all kinds of great articles on the internet, particularly about the Vega. The Vega was one of those projects where they came up with the idea, we're going to build a car that's going to compete with these imports. And they were poorly executed. They actually shipped them in rail cars. And to get more Vegas on the rail cars, they designed them to be shipped where they'd actually drive them onto a thing and then flip them up like this, so that the box car was like this, and all the Vegas were nose down on the sides of the car. And so that meant that you had problems with the oil inside the engine. You had problems with the batteries back then. You had problems with all kinds of other fluids. I'm not sure. It probably wouldn't affect the brakes, I don't think, but it might affect the transmission. So they had to do all kinds of really weird stuff to make it so they could be transported that way. And nobody ever tried moving that many vehicles in that manner before. And so that was one of the many, many problems that came up with the Vega. But the Vega was just it was a weird idea. They set a bunch of benchmarks that they had trouble hitting. And by the time they got things on the road, they were just junk. Just it was the epitome of junk. So I actually owned one briefly. Bill Van Ram points out the Vega Cosworth was a high performance Vega that you could buy one year. Yeah. And I remember there was one not far from me when I had my paper route. A guy had a Vega Cosworth, and the Cosworth Vega had like gold pinstripes on it. It looked really cool. Black with gold pinstripes back when that was a thing. What's the most current model year cars that count in classic car shows these days? Do people restore Chevy Celebrities or K cars? That's a good question, Robert Bettina. If you go to some car shows, you will find somebody who's dragged out one of those cars that you thought would never survive, and they've got one. And back when I was in college, I had a little Dodge Charger, the smaller one. I don't know what to call the platform, but not the original generation, but the next generation had a 2.2 liter engine, right? And I've been to car shows where there's a couple of those, and I always, oh my gosh, but they were such poorly built cars that I suppose if you had one that was stored perfectly the entire time, and then you just cleaned it up, that'd be great. But then you go, but underneath it all, it's still got that 2.2 liter engine, which is a piece of junk. And so I drove to California in a Dodge Charger. I'm trying to remember what year it was. It was black. It had a 2.2 liter engine in it, and manual transmission. And drove it to California, and I had it out there when I was in law school. And one day on the way into class, I went to shift into, I think, third gear. And it made the sound that you would get if you jammed an aluminum baseball bat into a wood chipper. And I realized that was probably a problem with the transmission. And I managed to limp it into school, and I think it's still at first and second gear. I forgot. But anyways, that car got me cross country. I drove it for a year here, cross country, and then survived the first 3/4 of law school. And so before I got out of law school, I had to buy a car in California and drive it back, which became a whole nother story because, among other things, Terry Towner says that's the L body. The L body. Thank you very much. And so the car I bought in California, I bought another one. I bought another slightly later model Charger and drove it back red with a gray interior leather and T-tops. And the funny thing is that in Michigan, when you buy a car, even with a lien on it, they give you the title, and then the lien holder issues you a lien termination statement. When I came back to Michigan, I was driving this car and I decided to get another one. And I went to a dealership to trade it in, and I didn't mention to the guy that I bought it in California. And in California at the time, they might still do this, I don't know. But the lien holder gets the title and they hang on to it until you pay it off. And the guy from the dealership called me a week or two after the deal went down. He's like, dude, if I'd known that you'd bought that car in California, I wouldn't have sold you a car. And I go, why? And he goes, it's such a pain in the butt trying to get this lien and, get the unliened title from California. He goes, it's a nightmare. He goes, your car's on my lot right now. He goes, I don't know when we'll be able to get rid of it. So another story altogether. What's her name? Had a Colt, the Dodge Colt. Yeah, there's a bunch of there's like the Omni Horizon. Remember that little thing? And the scariest part about all of this is that you could actually get some of those cars in high performance versions. We mentioned the Vega Cosworth, but for instance, there was a Shelby version of, I forget, it was the Horizon or the Colt or one of those, but it was a Shelby, and Carroll Shelby apparently would put his name on anything if you paid him. But, what are you going to do? 1-to-1 IT, 1989 Mazda 626, one of the best cars I ever owned. Yeah, actually, something. I know somebody had a Mazda 626 also right around that same time frame. Extremely dependable car. And the funniest thing was that, the Shelby GLHS. The funniest thing about the 626 was it was a lease. Right towards the end of the lease, it developed a weird problem where if you stepped on the clutch just right, you could get the car to start itself. I think it was the clutch. And you put the key in the ignition, and as long as it was in the on position, you could push this pedal down for, really, really hard, and the car would start. And what was happening was, I believe it was and some mechanic can explain this better than me, but I believe it was, there's a part of the starter circuit that requires you to put the clutch in for the car to start. And so something was shorting out in there so that when you pushed it down all the way, it was not only connecting the circuit, it was shorting it out and causing it to start. But other than that, it was a great car. But I've always loved really, really cool freakazoid malfunctions like that. Don Jackson Colts were sold by Dodge, but made in Japan. Yeah, and that's true of a lot of those. There's a time period where the car companies in Detroit realized they couldn't get up to speed as quickly as they could by simply buying cars that were built in Japan and rebadging them here. There were several of those that were pretty cool. And some of them they also just brought over and sold over here. But the Dodge Omni Plymouth Horizon, Steve Garner, yes, that's it. I knew some people who had those cars, and some of those cars got fantastic gas mileage. That was the thing that you buy one of these little cars and your friends are laughing at you. And in a break in the laughter, you say, by the way, it gets, 65 miles to a gallon or whatever it gets, And I'm sure I've told the story before, but I had a chemistry teacher in high school, Mr. Lazette, and he drove one of those Datsun B210s. And the Datsun B210 came in a color that was like cross between like yellow and green, but a kind of a color that you'd expect to see coming out of the bad part of an animal. It was a really, really ugly color. Datsun B210. And I remember him pulling in the parking lot with that one day in front of a bunch of us knuckleheads and us just laughing at him. I mean, we were laughing at him like it was like a cross between a Monty Python skit and like raw and nitrous or something. It was unbelievable. And later on in class, he goes, guys, it gets like 60 miles to a gallon or whatever, some insane amount of gasoline, and we're still laughing at him. And then because he's a chemistry professor, he goes, okay, let me explain this to you guys. He's like, what do you drive? And he picks some kid in the audience class, says, what do you drive? And the kid tells him. And he goes, okay, and he starts doing the math on how much oxygen we're wasting with our gas guzzlers versus how much oxygen he's wasting. And then, of course, how much carbon dioxide and monoxide he's creating versus how much we're creating with our cars, assuming that it's all just a chemical reaction. And I remember at the time going, he's got a point there. I still wouldn't drive that car, though. Dave Beeman says he saw something on the road 2 days ago, but I missed the top half of the conversation. Oh, Betsy Barnacle, the Rabbit, the VW Rabbit. That's one. Remember the Le Car, the Renault Le Car? I actually knew somebody who had a Le Car, and the Le Car had one of those stupid low-budget, poor man's sunroofs that was just like a piece of like canvas that you just like slide forward or slide back. They never looked right, but that's possibly the dumbest name ever for a car to be sold in America, calling it Le Car. Adam A's got another idea. Le Crap. There you go. Bad Drivers of North Texas. I thought you were going to get an IROC. I actually did have an IROC. I had the IROC RT, and I forgot what year it was. But one year of the IROC series, they raced those little Dodge Daytonas, and I had one. And mine had the dual overhead cam. I've told the story before. That thing broke timing belts like it was like they're just candy. I had it for a brief period of time. The car was pretty quick as far as that goes because it's turbocharged and whatnot. But it was not dependable. And actually, I was very good friends with an attorney at Chrysler at that point in my life. And I called the guy up and I said, hey, I got a problem. I go, I've got a car I bought used. I go, but it's a nightmare. And I sent him the VIN and I said, pull it and quietly to yourself, review how much money you've spent on warranty repairs. And I go, and in the meantime, it's snapped timing belts 3 times. And I forgot the time frame it was. I go, if you want me to, I'll keep it. And I'll keep bringing it back in for new timing belts. He's no. We'll buy it back. So we worked out a deal. They didn't actually buy the car back from me. He gave me a coupon good for money towards the purchase of another Chrysler product, which I then used to buy my first Jeep Wrangler. So I bought a Jeep Wrangler with that. So that's how I got myself into that. Echo 444. I had an IROC Daytona. Can't even remember how many timing belts I threw. It was fast. Did you have one that had the dual overhead cam with the bad timing belts? If so, I actually found a very interesting article about that on Allpar, the Mopar website. And the funny thing is that I was always convinced that my problem was limited to my car because the car was so unusual. There were not that many of them on the road. And I remember finding an article where one of the engineers who designed or helped work on the engine in that car said, no. The car had a problem with its timing belts, the way the engine was designed. We actually knew it was a problem. We couldn't fix it. We were always trying to find a fix. But it was a dual overhead cam engine with a timing belt that just went all over the place. And it was such a big, long timing belt. And it had problems. So Silence, what about the Buick Grand National? Yeah, the Buick Grand National is pretty cool. Buick, many people don't think about building muscle cars, after the golden era. In the 1980s, Buick actually built a Grand National, turbocharged, very, very cool looking cars at the time too. And a lot of energy coming out of a fairly small engine. So the Buick Grand National is cool. I've got a brother who's really into Buicks, the Skylarks back in the day, like the Grand Sports and so on. Very, very cool cars. Whenever I see those at car shows, I like them. It's a little more, Buick had a little more luxury to them. So they had nicer interiors, very, very nice design features. But the Grand Sport X, for instance, convertible Grand Sport X in white or the yellow, beautiful, beautiful cars. So Jeffrey Epstein had a 1980 Dodge Challenger. Yeah, that's long after the golden age of that name. The Plymouth Cricket. Yeah, another bad name. Someone else mentioned there was Daihatsu Charade. Someone needs to explain to them that while charade might be a game, it has different connotations in the English language. Buddy Weiser, I outran Grand Nationals all the time in my Mustang GT. There you go. Shannon Crawford, a 94 to 96 Buick Roadmaster Estate Wagon Sleeper. That's funny. But I got to tell you, one of the greatest names ever for any automobile, I will tell you, is the Roadmaster. Buick has used that name, I think, back to the 50s when they started using Roadmaster. And then later on, they put it on a bunch of other stuff. That car companies always do that. But I just think if you just said, come up with a cool name for a car, the Roadmaster is a pretty cool name for a car. AMC Pacer, I am an empowered one. I'm an empowered one. AMC Pacer. Yeah, Pacer, not so much of a great name. Grand National is not a muscle car. Well, depends what you're calling a muscle car. You know, muscle cars, generally speaking, the cars that are designed for performance. And you have to remember that you have to gauge cars based on their contemporaries. So you don't take a Grand National from the 80s and compare it to a mid-60s Hemi muscle car. You got to compare it to other cars of its time. So they're going to be on even footing when it comes to emissions, airbags, bumpers, all that stuff. So, you know, the crazy part is, you know, the people out there who say, Steve, you know, if you really are into performance, you know that an electric car has got monster acceleration and can out-accelerate anything out there. Yeah, it can. So can a motorcycle. But it's just, it depends on the experience you want, you know? So, what's her name? I met my husband when he had a 69 Cutlass. There you go. Were you impressed? The greatest thing ever is how many guys got cool cars in high school or right out of high school, assuming that the ladies would be impressed. It turns out most women didn't care. I remember driving around my 69 Dodge Charger at the time. Guys thought it was cool. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't really care if guys think my car is cool. And that's not the effect I'm going for. Bob A. Bong, my first car was a 1976 Toyota Land Cruiser. There you go. Hooter Snoocher says the Gremlins and the Yugos back ends were designed for pushing. That's probably true. Bob Summers, the Ford Escort was junk. And it also depends on which era Escort you're talking about. Some are worse than others. Sub GR77 says, mock the 90s Roadmasters all you want, but they were a great car. I missed mine. I wasn't mocking the Roadmasters. I'm just simply saying, like, for instance, when they have a Roadmaster station wagon with fake wood paneling on the sides, it's not the same as the original Buick Roadmaster back in the 50s in terms of how much cachet that car is going to have with that name. Jeffrey Epstein also had a diesel Chevette. Yeah, it was slow, but I was going to say 55 miles to a gallon sounds about right, you know. I bought gas yesterday, by the way, for $1.95 a gallon, which in Michigan's really cheap. I did see it for $1.89 a gallon. And many people are not aware of this, but I'll mention this, is that not only do we have the situation going on with recent events in the news, but we've also got a situation where Saudi Arabia and Russia are in a tiff over oil supplies because Saudi Arabia is the big player in OPEC, and they like to control the market to keep prices artificially high. Well, Russia has been cranking out the oil, and by cranking out the oil, meaning they've been selling it as fast as they can get it because they want cash. And they've been selling so much that it upset Saudi Arabia, who are saying, hey, look, you guys are destabilizing our market. And Vladimir Putin apparently does not take direction kindly from the Saudis. And so Saudi Arabia has a state-run oil company, and they basically said, look, if you want to see what we can do, we'll show you. And Putin said, knock yourself out. So the Saudis just went over to the spigot where the oil comes out and went with that sound effect. And next thing you know, oil prices dropped to $30 a barrel. And oil prices used to be much, much higher. So as a result of that, it's trickling down now to us. So gasoline under $2 a gallon. And it might be there for a while because people my age and older will remember when there were price wars, gas wars, when the gas stations would fight over who could sell the gasoline the cheapest. And I remember a brief period of time in my lifetime when gasoline was 25 cents a gallon. Price wars on Woodward Avenue, gas wars. And so right now you've got a price war going on with the oil suppliers instead of the gasoline vendors. And so you've got Saudi Arabia and Russia basically going, hey, watch what happens when we flood the market. Well, they're beating each other over the head, and we're coming out ahead. So, I don't know how much longer it's going to last. Probably won't last that long because Putin's going to realize, wait a second, if I've got to sell it for $30 a gallon or a barrel, and I can cooperate with these guys and just sell it for $50, why not? So that's what's going to happen. Clint Richardson, I hear there's a large quantity of oil reserves in the U.S. that is classified so it doesn't disrupt the price. Well, yeah, we've got the strategic oil reserves that we sit on just in case. So Louis Ludlam says, used to work for Saudi Aramco, the former American company. Yeah, and Aramco is the company I was talking about. So Paul Bednall says that it's roughly 117 to 130 a liter here in the UK, and those are pounds, not dollars. And so trying to convert that when you've got two different things to convert both pounds to dollars and liters to gallons, I don't think it's humanly possible. It's kind of like when you go, I drove through Canada to get to New York State last summer when I did that radio thing at WLLW in Geneva, New York. And I drove through and I bought gasoline. And you look at the price and it's priced per liter. And you stick the thing in your truck and you're watching the money go by, and it's like, those are Canadian dollars. I have no idea what any of it means. So Clint Richardson, 3 liters to a gallon, or 0.3. Got you. Diana says she remembers 30 cents a gallon when my dad owned a 69 Pontiac. How time flies. Yep, there you go. Mark Sparks, can you block the bots? We're deleting some of them, but we'll see. Mark Rain, $1.69 in Tecumseh, Michigan. Really? Yeah, I suspect near the major highways, like if you're along I-94, for instance, you're going to see cheaper prices. Tom Adams says Costco in Austin's got it for $1.65. There you go. Jay Kavanaugh, late 60s, we saw 11 cents a gallon in Chicago. Yeah, and I remember, like I said, around, I think it's 20 to 25 cents on Woodward Avenue as a little kid. And I remember somebody explaining to me, 25 cents a gallon, you get 4 gallons for $1. But then again, we also had Sinclair gas stations where the logo was the dinosaur. And it didn't occur to me till later that, we're actually pumping his remains through our car in a roundabout way. Hooter Snoocher says, you are a YouTube success when the porn spammers come out. Yeah. Hearns Martin says, Steve, you passed the bar but can't convert gallons to liters. I could in theory, but I'll tell you right now, there's no math on the Michigan bar. So, I can do math when I have to, but I hate to admit this. I converted something the other day. I forgot what it was. Grams to ounces. And you can go online on Google, grams to ounces, and up will pop a converter for you, and you just convert it. So, what's her name? What happened to engines that were supposed to run on donut grease? They have those. Multi-fuel engines can often burn on the oil, cooking oil, and things like that. My M35 Deuce-Naff theoretically could have run on a lot of those other things that are flammable and liquid. I didn't ever run on anything but diesel, but you can run them on that. It's a question of where you can find it, whether it's cheaper to get and process and to use it than to, use it as gasoline or to actually use gasoline. So, yeah, that's true. Fireman Jeff says you might get on a watch list for doing that conversion. Yeah. The English police are going to come get me for using metric. Siri will convert for you. I wouldn't know that, Bob Farnham, because I don't use Siri. I only thing I have in my life that is an Apple product is sitting right here, and it's off camera. Hang on. It's off camera on every single video I do. It's sitting right here, and it's a timer. And right now it's showing a clock because we started at 1 o'clock, so I'm watching the time. But whenever I'm doing it's dusty too. But whenever I do a video, I have a timer function, and I have it counting backwards from 20. Because I used to use a camera that was sensitive and could not shoot past 20 minutes. But I use it now just as a little mental thermometer to let me know how far into a video I've gone. Trying to gauge the attention span of the average viewer, seeing how that works out. So, Mark Sparks says turbines will burn pretty much any liquid fuel, and that is absolutely correct, my friend. The turbine car right here, I wrote the book about. They did demonstrations routinely running that thing on regular diesel fuel, kerosene, alcohol, peanut oil, Chanel No. 5, VO5 hairspray, and famously, they ran it on tequila for the president of Mexico when they brought it on the world tour. I may have told the story before, but it's a good one. When they were down in Mexico, they were telling that story to the president, and he goes, "Oh, that's cool." He goes, "Will it run on tequila?" And one of the engineers looks at the other engineer and goes, "I bet it will." And one of them snuck off really quickly and ran and found a phone and called Highland Park and said that the president of Mexico wants to know, will this thing run on tequila? And they're like, "We've never tried that before." So they actually had an engineer run down the street, Woodward Avenue, near the Highland Park place they did all this work, went to a party store and got the biggest jugs of tequila he could find that was cheap, brought it back to the lab where they had an engine on a stand, dumped it in, fired it up, and it ran. And they called the guy back and they go, "It will run on tequila." And they described the tequila they used. And they went back to the president and said, "Hey, President, if you want to, let's dump a couple gallons of your best tequila in here. I'll show you how it runs." And they did it. And they ran it on tequila. And that story, the beautiful thing about Chrysler at this time was the turbine car was a huge publicity stunt. And everything they did that could get publicity for free, they would do because it saves money on advertising. Just ask Elon Musk. So they contacted all the journalists who were there covering the story and said, "By the way, guys, we're going to do a really cool experiment. We're going to run this thing on tequila." And so they actually had stories. I've seen the story in the paper, the Detroit Free Press, Detroit News, where it says, President of Mexico rides in turbine car powered by tequila. And they got one whole news cycle out of it. And so, like I said, I get to add that to the list where I go, kerosene, diesel, home heating oil, alcohol, peanut oil, Chanel No. 5, VO5 hairspray, and tequila. So, Adam A., what kind of laws be passed when semi-trucks become more automated? I'm very curious about what's going to happen with the laws with respect to self-driving vehicles. Because most of the laws right now talk about as the person behind the wheel, they describe that as the person operating the vehicle. So if you can get into a car and just sit there like this and the car drives itself, technically you're still operating the vehicle. But I worry about what happens when somebody has a self-driving car that can be sent off autonomously to drive itself someplace. Someone has to be operating that vehicle. So, your car goes out and gets in a car accident. Cops show up at your house and write you and hand you a ticket. Your car runs over somebody. They come to your house and arrest you. So they're going to have to work a lot of those things out. There have been some famous stories recently about, like, for instance, a guy's car is driving across a parking lot, runs a stop sign, and a cop pulls it over and then let the guy go. Cop could have given him a ticket, though, and could have said, "By the way, you're operating the vehicle when you press the app saying, come get me." So, Audit Everywhere says, if the car does drive itself, we would get more videos by Steve Leto. I'm not against it. Neither am I. Hey, if I got the time and an audience, I'll talk. So I'm happy. Hearns Martin, Steve, given the circumstances, we'd be self-isolating from tequila. Wouldn't you isolate it with tequila? Look at that mighty fine logo right there. Look at that. Once again, I have to thank my friend Jane Chaika, designed the logo for me. Did a wonderful job. Yeah, no, there's going to be a lot of stuff happening in the field with laws trying to catch up with technology, and that happens. I mean, think back to when cars were first on the road, sharing the road with horses and buggies and people, and they had to say, oh, what are we going to do when one of these days a car is going to hit a horse? Well, how will we handle that? I'm sure they figured it out. So. Tim Sullivan says that the governor's banned donkey gymnastics. Well, that would be a problem, but I suspect what they're going to do is they're going to allow the donkey gymnastics to take place just without an audience. Because I don't think that recent events in the news affect donkeys, but the jury might still be out on that one. So there you go. Echo 444 says driverless semi-trucks could be sharing Florida highways as early as next year, and there'll be no requirement that surrounding motorists know it. And that's in quotes. I'm not sure who said that, but one thing I'll tell you is you have to be careful about predictions, because I can tell you a few predictions that I remember hearing about how we're all going to have jetpacks and we're all going to have flying cars. Okay. I understand that jetpacks are getting closer. Flying cars, and there are some problems that simply cannot be solved for flying cars. And what's funny is every video I do, doesn't matter, I can try to not offend anybody. I can wake up and go, I'm not going to offend anybody today. I'm going to do a video, not offend anybody. I did a video a couple of days ago. Oh, it was the Sunday live feed. Somebody asked about Bigfoot. I'm now getting angry emails from people who like Bigfoot and are upset that I said there is no such thing as Bigfoot. So I now have to add Bigfoot fans to the list of people I've offended. And I suspect my statement a moment ago saying that flying cars are not here and will not be here anytime soon is probably going to offend somebody. So I'll watch my email. The good news is that it's towards the end of the video, so people might not make it this far who are that upset about the lack of flying cars. Yeah, SubGR77 says he wants his flying car, and he blames it on the Jetsons. I don't blame you. Jerry Hindle, people driving in 2 dimensions is scary enough. Thank you. Can you imagine? Instead of getting rear-ended by a car, you can get like a car coming up underneath you. And worse is what happens if you're flying in a car and your engine stalls. See, if you're driving a car and your engine stalls, you pull over to the side of the road. When you're flying in your car and your engine stalls, you plummet like a brick. And that is referred to as lift degradation. That's what engineers call it, lift degradation. So when your lift degrades, that's what happens. So that's why flying cars are not here yet, and they won't be here for a while. Hey, Rory Howie points out, happy St. Patrick's Day, Steve. Thank you very much. And I mentioned, I think at the top, that this is in fact March 17th. I always forget that this is St. Patrick's Day because I'm not Irish. In case you couldn't figure that out. So I do have enough stuff here to indicate that I have some Finnish roots. The Finns actually celebrate a made-up holiday called St. Urho's Day. And I think my Finnish friends in Finland have no idea what I'm talking about. The American Finns invented a holiday to compete with St. Patrick's. I'm not a big fan, but it's there. AJC 894 says a 16-year-old flying would be scary. Yeah, can you imagine? My teenager just got a license, and now they're going to take off in the flying car. Maybe they have a graduated driver's license. So first you can drive, but only during daylight hours in 2 dimensions. Then you can drive in 2 dimensions during nighttime hours. Then you can drive 3 dimensions, daylight hours, and then eventually, like everybody else, you can fly in 4, all 3 dimensions at night. So there you go. Anti-Anonymous says there is a St. Urho's bar in Helsinki. Is there really? How big is it over there? I mean, how big is this whole St. Urho's Day over there? I didn't think it was that big. So, Yeah, Dave Beeman, gravity is a little bit more than most people are going to be able to handle. Yeah, and it's also very harsh and unforgiving. So let's see if we can grab one here quick. Flying car dash cams will be amazingly scary and funny. Bob Summers. That's true. That's true. Auntie Anonymous says they know about it, but don't celebrate it. Yeah, and that's the point, is that it's one of those things that a couple fins over your made up. Yeah, some people got behind it, but the fins being as inward as we are, don't really celebrate a whole lot of anything, so it didn't really catch on that much. But there you go. Anyways, we've been on for an hour and a half. I hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, I was just sitting around and I realized that pretty much everyone else is just sitting around. So I'm happy to sit around and talk once in a while. I can't do this more than once a day, but keep commenting and so on. I'm curious to know if this is a good time for people on a weekday. I did 1 o'clock on Sundays before, and it worked out very, very well. But if there's a better time of day than this, let me know. I'm happy to shift it around and play with it. I've had some people say, hey, something, I can't do these at all during this particular time. Why don't you ever do them here? So I got no problem shifting around a little bit. Sundays will always be at 1 o'clock simply because I like to have some things in my life that are set like that. But as far as these go, during the lockdown, during the shelter in place, recent events in the news, we'll play around with it a little bit, but I hope you enjoyed it. We did 500 people here. That's more than enough from me. Otherwise, questions or comments, put them below. I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.